Okay, now let's do the countdown, just in case I'm not on somewhere. Hey guys, Michael Patton here, getting ready to do a Uber Theologian. Out delivering food and thought I'd deliver some theology while I'm waiting for the next order. So let's talk about something I've been writing on recently. I've been talking about papal infallibility. I've been talking about generally the infallibility of the Catholic Church, but my specific thing that I've done on credohouse.org, you can go there and read my latest blog on this. But the irony of the proclamation of papal infallibility for many reasons. Now, let me define what papal infallibility is before anything else. Papal infallibility has to do with the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, the vicar of Christ within the Roman Catholic Church. He can speak ex cathedra, and those ex cathedra statements are infallible. Now, one of the things that most people misunderstand and really argue against, but they're arguing against straw men whenever you're not a Catholic. I'm not a Roman Catholic, but I don't want anybody arguing straw men. But most people say, well, the Pope isn't infallible, and automatically think that what they mean by that is that everything the Pope says is infallible. That's just simply untrue. That is not what the doctrine means, at least the way it's developed to mean. I don't think it has ever meant that. I don't think you could ever even get too close to that. But what it is that whenever the Pope decides to speak infallibly, and so it's got to be an intentional thing, the Pope has to decide to speak infallibly on some contentious area within the church. Now, it just depends. I mean, every pope has this power. They can step in at any time and solve controversies, solve problems that are going on within the church, especially in matters of doctrine and matters of faith and practice. Whenever he speaks infallibly, that is an infallible statement, or ex cathedra, that is an infallible statement. The rest of what he says, through papal bulls and such like that, if they do not say infallible, again, I'm just trying to represent Roman Catholics the way they would want to be represented. Like a papal bull, if he sends out a cyclical letter that goes around to the church, unless he says this is infallible, it just creates doctrine, not dogma. Dogma is the infallible declarations of the church. Doctrine is just that which it believes, but doesn't necessarily hold to people to believe it infallibly. Now, the irony that I was pointing out, the difficulty I'm pointing out within my blog is that Roman Catholics will often come to Protestants, and it's very effective. This is a very effective argument. Will often come to Protestants and say, you believe in sola scriptura, right? Yes, we do. What is sola scriptura? Sola scriptura is that the scriptures are the final and ultimate authority in matters of faith and practice for the church, for the Christian. So the scripture alone, only the Bible is ultimately authoritative. And many people would say it's also the only infallible source, which there's a little bit of problems with that, but I'm gonna say in the context of when this developed, it was fighting against the Roman Catholic magisterium, the councils and the popes who were speaking infallibly. So basically, tradition as given through this living tradition of the magisterial authority, the congregation of bishops in the church, way high up, and the Pope, obviously the highest up. They are the ones who are able to speak infallibly, and the Roman Catholic or the sola scriptura came about by the reformers saying, no, they've erred many times. It is not infallible. There's no reason to think they are infallible, because not only the argument goes, have they erred, but also there's nothing to substantiate such a doctrine. So what is the irony here? Well, the irony is this. Well, no, I haven't gotten to the irony. Listen, hang with me. Roman Catholics will say, so you believe that the scripture alone is your final source, no traditions that have been handed down since the death of the last apostle, since the codification of scripture, none of those traditions are infallible, correct? And I'd say, yes, that's right. I don't believe anything. I mean, I respect the councils. I respect especially the first three, maybe even four councils, but I do not believe them to be infallible. And so they would say, okay, where did you get your canon from? And what canon means is the books that belong in the Bible, because the Bible is what makes up what we believe to be the only infallible or final ultimate source. They say, where do you get the books? And we say, well, it's written in the table of contents, right? Well, that ain't going to work. Table of contents is not going to work. They would say, you got the canon itself. The determination of the Bible, what books belong in it, comes only from tradition. John did not write at the end of the book of Revelation and say, okay, here's the books that you need to include in the Bible, and or are our table of contents at the beginning of our Bibles. No matter what Bible it is, the table of contents is not inspired. We do believe that the 66 books that we have as Protestants are correct, but it's a whole different argument. And so they would come back and say, wait a minute. You believe in the infallible Bible, right? Yes, I do. Well, you don't believe that we have an infallible table of contents for that Bible, right? And I'd say, well, yes, you put it that way, and that is true. I do not believe in an infallible table of contents. They would say, okay, here's the deal. You believe in a fallible canon made up of infallible books. And many people should come to that. They kind of fall apart and say, whoa, you're right. I mean, we do have to have tradition at some point. And some people add tradition through, maybe the Council of Hippo, the Council of Rome, whenever we established the New Testament books, maybe the Athanasian Festal letter that he sent out in 360 sometime. However, you shouldn't do that. I mean, yes, we do believe in a fallible canon of infallible books. But instead of answering that argument and going through the whole history of the canon and trying to get people to be more confident as Protestants in our canon, saying that we can be confident, I want to take it a different way. Another thing the Catholic Church will do is say, not only do you believe in a fallible canon of infallible books, do you believe your interpretation is correct? Do you believe your interpretation is infallible? You see, here we go again. You get us backed up against the wall and we say, well, I believe it's correct, but I don't believe it's infallible. I can err, so therefore my interpretation might be wrong. We have to admit that because we're not infallible. Therefore, at that point, here's where we go. Okay, the Catholic will say, you have a fallible interpretation of a fallible canon of infallible books. You see how it's piling up? Fallibility. And so they would say, here's the solution, guys, is you believe in tradition. You believe in the magisterial authority of the church. You believe that God has left us this authority, just like he did with prophets in the Old Testament or judges in the Old Testament and apostles in the New Testament. He didn't leave us hopeless. We're not stranded at sea whenever we're interpreting the scripture. We can know what the scripture means. We can not only know the canon of it, but we can know what the scripture means based upon the proclamations of the church. That's why we need the Roman Catholic Church. That's why we need the congregation of bishops to get together for councils. That's one way they do infallibility. There's been 21 ecumenical councils from the Catholic Church standpoint, but it's the congregation of bishops through the councils or the Pope's ex cathedra statements by himself. Both of those qualify for infallibility or interpreting the tradition and the scriptures correctly. So the Pope can step in at any time, solve a problem if you don't know how to interpret a Bible verse, or it's causing big controversy, and so can councils, as they did, as you can see in 1545 to or 1546 to 1565, one of the major times they stepped in at Vatican Council. Oh, excuse me, the Council of Trent, and defined what they meant, how the reformers were wrong, and how they are to interpret certain passages of Scripture. So here's the deal: we've got a better way. As a Roman Catholic, they would say we've got a better way because we have something that is infallible, a living authority, a three-legged stool. The traditions as they're handed down to us unwritten, the traditions as you have the Bible, and then the infallible authority of the living authority of the Catholic Church to come and interpret both. So it's a three-legged stool: unwritten traditions, the written traditions, which is the Bible, and then somebody coming in and interpreting for us. So they say we have a better way out. You can be sure what the canon is. You can be sure of your faith, all these different doctrines. And you say, oh, okay, yeah, that does sound good. And that's a primary reason that people do get into Roman Catholicism often, is that it gives them a sense of comfort. Now, here's the irony. Here's the problem. Okay. Does it actually give comfort? I don't think so. I don't see how it could. Yes, we have an infallible book that has a fallible canon and fallible interpretations. We do our best to understand what books are in the Bible and what our interpretations are. As a matter of fact, with most of these things, I think we can be very certain, have much warrant for what we believe. Maybe not infallible warrant, but we have enough warrant to morally obligate ourselves to make decisions one way or another. That's the way I believe, in short. We can go over the canon some other time, but that's the way I believe in short. Now, here's the problem, and I'm responding as a Protestant to a Catholic. Here's the problem with your argument you just made. Your argument assumes that you have no time of interpretation personally yourself. Because remember, you have a infallible canon of infallible books with a fallible interpretation. So you start right there with a fallible interpretation, and that's as far as you need to go because you've already lost infallibility from their standpoint. However, listen, okay, 21 ecumenical councils, right, that have come in and made decisions, infallible decisions, all the way, go way back, to 325, all the way, and you read the writings there, and you read what the councils say. Now, I mean, most of them are very old documents. The last council was Vatican II in 1965. So most of them are very contextualized councils dealing with problems of their day. And even the one today, even if it was written today, even if the Pope got up and said, hey, we believe in evolution or something like that, because controversy. And then you say, oh man, all right, he settled that problem for us. We don't have to worry about young earth, old earth. So as Catholics, we believe in evolution. Now, the problem is you have to interpret the Pope. You're still up the creek in a way. We're all up the same creek of fallibility because you have to interpret the Pope, you have to interpret the councils, you have to interpret. I mean, and it's not easy to interpret. It's not. I mean, I've studied the councils. There's much disagreement in Roman Catholicism about the councils. So that's one irony that we set aside and we say it is irony. We all start with fallibility. You fallibly interpret the traditions that have been interpreted by the magisterial authority. So you fallibly interpret the magisterial authority. These are not perfect whenever you read them. Like I said, it's very contextualized, just like the Bible. And then also we're fallible in our canon and interpretation of the Bible. We both start with infallibility. But even more than this, here's a more ironic thing. It's that the Pope supposedly speaks ex cathedra. He hasn't done it many times, at least according to most people. He hasn't done it many times. That's my point. According to most people, he hasn't done it many times. We don't know how many times the Pope has spoken. Therefore, we don't have an infallible canon of the Pope's ex cathedra statements. This is significant. It's incredibly significant. We do not have a fallible canon. We don't have a list. If I was to talk to a Roman Catholic, hey, I want to interpret the Bible rightly, so give me all the councils. They give the councils to me. I've got it. I've got most of the traditions and stuff at home where you can read about them. You can read about them in the Catechism, even though the Catechism's not infallible. Different story. But give me all the things the Pope has said infallibly that you're sure he has said infallibly. And they say, well, there's differences of opinion. Some people say he's spoken 6 times, some people 3 times, some people even say he's never spoken. Many people will say he's spoken many more. So I said, wait a minute, okay? Not only do you have a fallible interpretation of the traditions that you think interpret everything, you also don't have an infallible canon of papal ex cathedra statements. Do you get it? There's not a list. There's not a list of when the Pope has spoken and when he is not, or all the times the Pope has spoken infallibly. Now, they may say, well, there's much agreement, so it's okay. It's not a big deal. Well, okay, then we could say that about the canon of Scripture. We could say, well, there's a lot of agreement among us, so it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal if you're making this argument. You see, as a Protestant, I would never make that argument. I don't have to have infallibility to have conviction that what I believe is true. I just have to have warrant. Warrant is the key. Being able to demonstrate that it is the best solution, the best option. And then we make decisions based upon warrant. That's what we do every day. No matter what, there's no infallible declarations. Whenever I got out in the car to go drive, there's no infallibility that says I won't get in a wreck and hurt myself. I have to trust in the Lord, and I have to do it based upon the warrant that is given. This car is acting pretty good, so I think it's going to make it. Needs brakes bad, but I don't think that's going to do anything except for ruin my rotors. So here's the deal, folks. Here it is. Here's the final irony. They have a fallible canon, which they don't even have a canon at all, of infallible ex cathedra statements. And they interpret both the ex cathedra statements and the traditions of the church that they were handed by the Council of Trent, by Vatican II. They have to personally interpret it, personally apply. And let me tell you something again, that is not unified. I mean, try to get Catholics to agree on what does ex cathedra nulla salus, which is outside the church, there is no salvation. You will see massive disagreement. And so at this point, you have a situation where both in the same boat. The difference is, I would say, is that we are taking out the middleman. We believe in the Scriptures. We don't have to go through each one of these. We use them. We use the traditions of the church. We use St. Augustine. We use John Calvin. We use Athanasius, and we believe them to be respectable, but those only provide warrant for our understanding. They do not provide infallibility. I think the main problem with the Catholic Church today, especially in a postmodern world, is they can't quit searching after infallibility of our interpretation, which is just unreasonable, untenable. You'll always have to interpret whatever infallible statement comes out too. So this is the irony of Roman Catholicism's statements about infallibility. I think it's very, very important. Main reason it's very important is because I think it's a decent argument at first, whenever they say you have a fallible canon of infallible books. I think it's a good art. It's very emotive. It pulls at you and you're like, wow, yeah. But they don't have a solution for it. All they do is pile on more problems and then end at the same place as us. So we take out the middleman. We go straight to the Scriptures and use all the other resources to help us interpret it and try to provide enough warrant both for the canon of Scripture, which we have plenty of warrant for, and for the interpretation that we're using, which varies depending upon the passage of the Bible. Some of them are very clear, some of them aren't. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. I am going to give you a place to go right here. And this is if you want to support me. I've spent the last maybe 20 minutes or so doing this. Let's see how long. Yeah, just 20 minutes, right above 20 minutes. And go there and become a patron, or go there and click on the first post that you see, the needs of the ministry, and throw me a tip, through Cash App, VMO. I do need it. I do. And that's what I live off of. So think about that. If you think this is valuable to you, if you don't think it's valuable, don't worry about it. Not at all. Wait until it is valuable. One of these days, I'll win you over to the value of what I'm doing here. This is the Uber Theologian. I thank you guys all for showing up, and we will see you next time I do this. And I don't know how to turn this off. So I see